Grandpa sold me his apartment for $1 to keep it out of greedy hands. 2 years later, those hands came reaching anyway. Part 1. The bond that built everything. I was always the one who showed up. While my cousins visited my grandfather on holidays, Christmas, maybe his birthday if they remembered, I was there every week. Sometimes twice a week. It started when I was a teenager, spending summers at his apartment, learning how to work with my hands in his workshop. He taught me how to measure twice, cut once. How to sand with the grain. How to look at a piece of raw wood and see what it could become. But he taught me more than woodworking. He taught me about patience, about integrity, about the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need to announce itself. He told me stories about the war, about meeting my grandmother, about raising his children in that apartment when the neighborhood was different, rougher, full of young families trying to make something from nothing. By the time I turned 30, my grandfather had become more than family. He was my mentor, my friend, the model for the kind of man I wanted to be. And he knew it. He saw how I showed up when others didn't. He noticed the difference between someone who calls on birthdays and someone who brings soup when you're sick, who fixes the leaky faucet without being asked, who sits and listens even when the stories repeat themselves. When he turned 85 and started thinking about what he'd leave behind, I was the natural choice for his most prized possession. The apartment wasn't just property. It was his history, his life condensed into walls and windows and floorboards that creaked in familiar places. He'd bought it in 1974, the year my father was born. Raised 3 children there. Became a widower there when my grandmother passed 15 years ago. Grew old there, surrounded by 50 years of accumulated meaning. It was worth about $185,000 on the current market. A decent sum. But to him, and to me, its value couldn't be calculated in dollars. He wanted me to have it. Not divided among squabbling relatives. Not sold and proceeds split into fractions. Whole. Preserved. Lived in by someone who would understand what every scratch on the workshop bench represented. The problem was taxes. A direct gift of $185,000 triggers significant gift tax consequences. My grandfather had worked hard his whole life, saved carefully, and he wasn't about to let the government take a bite out of what he wanted to pass on cleanly. He needed a legal workaround. His lawyer advised a common solution: sell the property for a nominal amount. A $1 sale. Legally, it's a transaction, documented, notarized, registered with all the proper authorities. The price is unusual but not illegal. Courts have upheld such sales countless times when the intent is clear estate planning. It's not a loophole, it's an established practice. 2 years ago, my grandfather executed the paperwork. Bill of sale. Notarization. Title transfer. I became the legal owner of the apartment where he'd spent half a century of his life. I didn't move in immediately. He continued living there with my blessing. The plan was simple. He'd live out his remaining days in the home he loved, and I'd take full possession afterward. A clean transfer, properly done, between a man and the grandson he trusted. I thought the hard part would be watching him get older, watching time take what it takes from everyone eventually. I didn't know the vultures were already circling. Update 1. The decline and the vultures' arrival. 6 months ago, everything changed. My grandfather's health declined sharply. The mind that had been so clear, so full of stories and wisdom, began to fragment. Dementia crept in like a thief, stealing pieces of him little by little. Some days he knew me. Some days he thought I was my father. Some days he didn't know where he was at all. He couldn't manage living alone anymore. The decision to move him to a care facility was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I sat with him while we packed a small bag of essentials. He looked around the apartment, his life, and I could see him trying to hold on to it, trying to memorize what he was leaving. The workshop, he said, one of his clearer moments. Take care of the workshop. I will, Grandpa. I promise. I started going to the apartment regularly after that. Cleaning. Making small repairs. Honoring his space while slowly preparing to make it my own someday. Every time I walked through the door, I felt his presence, even with him gone. The smell of wood shavings still lingered in the workshop. His books lined the shelves exactly as he'd arranged them. I wasn't erasing him, I was continuing him. I thought the grief of watching him fade would be the hardest thing. Then my uncle called. We need to talk about Dad's apartment. My uncle is my father's brother. 55 years old, and in that time he's managed to fail at almost everything he's touched. Failed businesses. Failed marriages, 3 of them. Estranged from his own children, who got tired of his borrowing money he never repaid and his promises he never kept. He's always been the family's cautionary tale, the one everyone whispers about at gatherings when he's not there. He'd largely ignored my grandfather for years. Too busy with his own dramas, his own schemes. He'd show up at Christmas if it was convenient, maybe call on birthdays, but the weekly visits, the real presents? Never. My grandfather stopped expecting anything from him a long time ago. But when my uncle heard about the $1 sale, suddenly his interest was revived. Not in my grandfather. In the apartment. I explained patiently that the apartment was legally mine now. The sale was complete. Documented. Registered. Done. He laughed. Actually laughed, like I'd told a joke. A $1 sale? That's not a transaction, that's a joke. You paid $1 for a $185,000 apartment? That's fraud. That's tax evasion. That's elder abuse, convincing an old man to sign away his property for nothing. He paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I've talked to a lawyer. We're going to challenge this in court and get that apartment distributed properly among the heirs. You got greedy, kid. Now you'll pay. The accusations came fast after that. His legal theory, the $1 sale was a sham transaction. No real consideration exchanged, therefore not a valid sale. Without a valid sale, the property would remain part of my grandfather's estate, to be distributed when he dies, or challenged while he's still alive on grounds of incapacity. My uncle claimed my grandfather was already showing cognitive decline when he signed the documents. That was a lie. The sale happened 2 years ago, and the dementia only started 6 months ago. But truth doesn't stop someone who's grasping for what isn't theirs. He threw everything at the wall: fraud, undue influence, elder abuse, tax evasion. If something stuck, he'd get a piece of the apartment. That was the whole strategy, not justice, just extraction. I called my lawyer immediately. Her assessment was calm but sobering. Dollar sales are legal and extremely common for estate planning. Courts uphold them regularly when there's clear documentation and the grantor was competent at the time. His dementia now doesn't invalidate decisions he made when he was sharp. We have notarized documents. Competency wasn't challenged at the time of the sale. There's no evidence of fraud or coercion. So we're fine. She paused. His case is weak. But he can still make you spend a lot of money defending it. That's the real game here. He's betting you'll settle rather than fight. I wouldn't settle. Couldn't. This wasn't about money. It was about my grandfather's wish, his choice, his right to give what was his to whoever he wanted. My uncle was trying to steal that. I wouldn't let him. Update 2. The family fractures and the legal battle begins. My uncle had been busy. Before I even knew I needed to defend myself, he'd been politicking throughout the family, spreading his version of events. He stole the apartment from a dying old man. He manipulated his grandfather into signing away his life's investment. The $1 price proves it was theft, not a legitimate sale. We need to fight this for what's right, for Dad, who can't fight for himself. Some relatives, I'm ashamed to say, were sympathetic. Not because they believed I'd done anything wrong. Deep down, most of them knew the kind of relationship I had with my grandfather. But they hadn't gotten an apartment either. Greed creates strange alliances. Others saw through my uncle immediately. My father was furious. My father wanted you to have that apartment, Dad told me. He told me directly years ago. Said you were the only one who actually cared about him as a person, not just as a source of holiday dinners. This sale was his wish, not your manipulation. My brother is doing what my brother always does, looking for something he didn't earn. Dad offered to testify about my grandfather's wishes if it came to that. It helped to have support, but family testimony is always complicated in court. Everyone has motives. Everyone can be questioned. Before full litigation, there was a mediation attempt. Me, my uncle, both lawyers, and a neutral mediator sitting around a conference table trying to find common ground that didn't exist. My uncle's opening position was delivered with the confidence of someone who believes they're being reasonable. The apartment should be sold, proceeds split among all grandchildren and children. That's fair. That's what Dad would have wanted if he'd been thinking clearly. I kept my voice steady. Grandfather chose to give the apartment to me specifically. He had the legal right to do that. The sale is valid. A $1 sale isn't a real sale. My uncle leaned forward. You paid nothing and got everything. That's not legal, it's theft. The mediator asked what my uncle would accept to settle. Half the apartment's value. $92,500. That's my minimum. Considering what he's taken from the rest of us, it's generous. I refused. The mediation failed in under an hour. What my uncle didn't understand, or didn't care about, was that settling would mean declaring that my grandfather's wishes didn't matter. That his clear, documented, legally executed choice could be overridden by someone who'd ignored him for years. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. But the legal fees were already accumulating. My lawyer required a retainer. There were filing fees, document preparation, hours of research. By the time we filed our formal response to his challenge, I'd spent $8,000. My uncle, meanwhile, had found a lawyer willing to work on contingency. If they won, the lawyer took a percentage of whatever they extracted. If they lost, my uncle paid nothing. He had nothing to lose. I was bleeding money defending what was already mine. The system, I learned, often favors the challenger who has no skin in the game. Update 3. The courtroom and the grandfather's letter. The case went to court 6 weeks later. My uncle's lawyer was good, I'll give him that. He presented the case as a story of exploitation, a young man isolating an elderly relative, manipulating him during cognitive decline, extracting a valuable property for a symbolic dollar that was really no payment at all. Sham transaction, he said repeatedly. No real consideration. No true meeting of the minds. Just a sophisticated form of theft dressed up in legal paperwork. He argued that my grandfather was already showing signs of cognitive decline 2 years ago when the sale was executed. That I had undue influence over a vulnerable old man. That by accepting the apartment, I had committed elder abuse. The accusations made me sick. This was my grandfather they were talking about, the sharpest, clearest-minded man I'd known until very recently. The man who had made this choice deliberately, who had consulted his own lawyer, who had known exactly what he was doing and why. My lawyer countered methodically. She presented the documentation, the sale documents, properly executed. The notarization, unimpeachable. The title transfer, completed without issue 2 years ago. She called my grandfather's doctor from the time of the sale. He testified that there were no cognitive concerns documented at that time. I saw him regularly. He was sharp, engaged, made his own decisions. There was no indication of dementia or diminished capacity. Then came the notary. She was in her 60s, with 30 years of experience witnessing exactly these kinds of documents. She remembered my grandfather clearly. He was sharp, she said from the witness stand. He knew exactly what he was doing. He told me he wanted his grandson to have the apartment because his grandson was the one who actually cared about him. Those were his words. His grandson was the one who showed up. My uncle's lawyer tried to discredit her. Maybe she hadn't done a proper competency assessment. Maybe she'd been rushed. Maybe her memory was faulty after 2 years. She didn't waver. I've done this for 30 years. I know when someone is being coerced. I know when someone is confused. He was neither. He was happy about his decision. Relieved, even. Like he was putting something precious in safe hands. But the moment that changed everything, the moment I saw my uncle's face go pale, was when my lawyer introduced a document he didn't know existed. My grandfather had written a letter. 2 years ago, at the time of the sale, he'd sat down with his lawyer and written a letter to be sealed and opened only if his decision was challenged. He knew his family. He knew his son. He knew what might happen. My lawyer read it aloud to the court. I am giving my apartment to my grandson through a $1 sale because I love him and want him to have it. My other children and grandchildren have not been part of my life the way he has been. Some visit on holidays when it's convenient. Some call when they remember. But he is the one who comes every week. He is the one who learned my trade in my workshop. He is the one who listens to my stories even when I've told them before. This is my choice, made freely, while I am of sound mind. My lawyer has explained the legal implications. My doctor confirms I have no cognitive impairment. I know exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. If anyone challenges this decision after I'm gone or after my mind begins to fail, know this: they are trying to take what I intentionally gave away. They are trying to override my wishes because they want something that was never meant to be theirs. My wish is clear. I have written it, signed it, and sealed it. Respect it. To my grandson, the apartment is yours. Take care of the workshop. Live well. Remember me. The courtroom was silent when she finished reading. My uncle stared at the table. His lawyer shuffled papers uselessly. There was nothing to say. My grandfather had anticipated exactly this challenge and had preemptively destroyed any claim that he hadn't known what he was doing. The judge took a recess to review all evidence. When she returned, her ruling was clear and direct. The $1 sale is valid. The documentation is proper. The grantor was competent at the time of the transaction, as evidenced by medical records, notary testimony, And most compellingly, by a letter written by the grantor himself anticipating this exact challenge. There is no evidence of fraud, coercion, or undue influence. The challenge is dismissed. I could have collapsed with relief. My lawyer squeezed my arm. Each party will bear their own legal costs, the judge continued. But let me be clear for the record, this was a valid estate planning transaction, executed properly. The property belongs to the new owner legally and without question. My uncle stood up abruptly and walked out without looking at me. His lawyer followed, already packing his briefcase. Nothing gained, nothing lost, for them. For me, it was $15,000 and months of stress to defend what had already been mine. But it was over. The apartment was confirmed as mine. Completely, finally, legally. Update 4. The aftermath and grandfather's final gift. My uncle didn't take the loss gracefully. But then, he'd never taken anything gracefully in his life. He'd spent nothing on the challenge. His contingency lawyer absorbed the loss, but he'd also gained nothing. He'd tried to steal from his father and his nephew and failed. The court documents were public record. Everyone who cared to look could see exactly what he'd attempted and how thoroughly it had been rejected. The family fallout was swift and total. Even relatives who had initially been sympathetic to his fairness argument were disgusted by how he'd handled things. Trying to depose a dementia patient. Calling me a thief in court. Disrespecting his own father's explicit, documented wishes. He stopped being invited to family events. Not dramatically, not with any announcement. People just stopped including him. Stopped returning his calls. Stopped pretending that blood obligation extended to someone who saw family as a resource to exploit. He became what he'd always been, but now openly. The one who takes, the one who grasps, the one who shows up only when there's money to grab. I tried to focus on other things. The apartment. My grandfather. I visited the care facility every other day. Some days he knew me, and we'd talk about the workshop, about the apartment, about the memories that still lived in both of us. Some days he thought I was my father, and I'd gently play along, not wanting to confuse him further. Some days he didn't know anyone at all, and I'd just sit with him, holding his hand, being present. 4 months after the court ruling, his condition worsened rapidly. The doctors said it was a matter of days. I made sure someone was with him around the clock. Me, my father, the staff who had come to care about the gentle old man in room 114. I was there at the end. He'd been unresponsive for hours, his breathing shallow and irregular. Then, suddenly, his eyes opened. Clear. Present. The fog lifted for one final moment. He looked at me, and his hand found mine with surprising strength. "The apartment," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "You have it." I leaned close. "I have it, Grandpa. It's safe. Nobody can take it." He nodded slowly. The faintest smile crossed his face. "The workshop," he said. "Take care of." "I will. I promise. I'll take care of everything." His eyes closed. His grip relaxed. His breathing slowed, then stopped. He died knowing his wish was honored. He died knowing that his son's greed couldn't steal what he'd given with love. He died with my hand in his, in the peace of a man whose final gift was protected. I stayed with him for a long time after. The nurses gave me space. Eventually, I called my father, and we made the arrangements together. The funeral was small. Family, a few of his old friends who were still alive. My uncle didn't come, whether by choice or because no one told him. I never found out and never asked. It didn't matter. He'd lost the right to mourn the man he'd tried to rob. At the service, my father spoke about his father's life. The hard work, the sacrifices, the 50 years in the apartment that had sheltered 3 generations. I spoke about what my grandfather had taught me: patience, integrity, the value of showing up. I didn't mention the court case. Didn't need to. Everyone there knew what had happened. And they knew who had been there for my grandfather in life, and who had only appeared when they smelled money. Update 5. The inheritance and the new beginning. With my grandfather gone, his will was executed. The estate wasn't large. Small savings, personal possessions, the accumulated stuff of a long life. He'd been specific about what went where. His watch went to my father. His wedding ring went to my aunt. His tools, every hand plane, every chisel, every carefully maintained instrument from 50 years of woodworking, went to me. Everything else was distributed among family members according to his wishes. My uncle got nothing. Not because of the apartment dispute, that had been separate, handled years before my grandfather's death. No, my uncle got nothing because my grandfather had cut him out of the will long ago, after one too many loans that were never repaid, One too many broken promises, one too many years of being treated as a source of money rather than a father. The will had been updated 5 years before the apartment sale. My grandfather had known exactly what his son was, and he'd made his choices accordingly. When my uncle heard he'd been excluded entirely, he threatened to challenge the will too. Nobody took him seriously anymore. His pattern was clear now: challenge everything, grasp at anything, never accept that some things simply weren't his to take. Last I heard, he was consulting lawyers about his options. They probably told him what everyone else could see: the will was ironclad, the estate was modest anyway, and he'd already burned through whatever goodwill the family legal system might have extended him. I don't think about him much anymore. He's become what he always was going to become, alone with his own nature, surrounded by the consequences of a lifetime of taking. I live in my grandfather's apartment now. I moved in 3 months after his passing, once I'd finished processing the grief enough to make practical decisions. The first night, I sat in his reading chair and cried. The second night, I slept better than I had in months. By the third night, it felt like home. I've made changes, painted some walls, updated the kitchen fixtures, added my own furniture alongside his. But I've kept the things that matter. His books line the shelves exactly as he arranged them. His reading chair sits by the window where the afternoon light is best. And his workshop remains almost exactly as he left it. The tools are old but maintained. I oil them the way he taught me. The workbench has 50 years of marks and stains. Every nick tells a story. I've added my own marks now, my own projects, my own accumulating history layered over his. Tonight, I'm making something small, a picture frame. The wood is cherry, from a board he'd been saving. For something special, he'd told me once years ago. I think this counts. I measure, cut, sand, join. The work is meditative. The smell of sawdust fills the small space. His presence fills it too, somehow, not supernaturally, just memorially. The muscle memory of techniques he taught me, the echo of his voice explaining how to read the grain. When the frame is finished, I mount a photograph. Him at 67, me at 10. Both of us smiling in this very room, sawdust in our hair, a half-finished birdhouse on the bench between us. My grandmother took that photo before she passed. I hang it on the workshop wall. The apartment is quiet, full of memory, empty of my grandfather but somehow still containing him. The $1 sale that my uncle called fraud gave me this, not just property, but continuation. Not just real estate, but relationship extending past death. Not just 4 walls and a roof, but 50 years of someone's life, now part of mine to carry forward. Reflections. My uncle said a $1 sale isn't a real sale. But the law disagrees. Nominal consideration is legal, common, and routinely upheld. My grandfather's lawyer knew this. The notary knew this. The judge who ruled in my favor knew this. The only person who didn't know, or pretended not to know, was the one who wanted something he wasn't given. He accused me of elder abuse for accepting a gift from a man who loved me. The irony still takes my breath away. The man who actually abused my grandfather was my uncle, ignoring him for years, then trying to steal from him when property was at stake. The projection was breathtaking. My grandfather wrote that letter specifically anticipating this challenge. If anyone challenges this, know they're trying to take what I intentionally gave away. He knew his son, knew what would happen, prepared for the vulture while hoping it wouldn't come. It came. The letter stopped it. My uncle had nothing to lose, contingency lawyer, no upfront costs. I spent $15,000 defending what was already mine. The system rewards challengers and punishes owners. You can be completely right and still pay a fortune proving it. The notary remembered my grandfather clearly. He wasn't confused, he was happy. 30 years of experience witnessing documents, and she knew exactly what she saw. My uncle's lawyer tried to discredit her. Failed. Because truth has a weight that speculation can't match. My grandfather died knowing his wish was honored. His last lucid moment was asking if I had the apartment. I did. He nodded and let go. That piece was worth every dollar I spent, every hour in court, every family relationship that my uncle's greed destroyed. My uncle got nothing from the will either. My grandfather had cut him out years ago. So he tried to steal from me instead. When that failed, he was left with exactly what he deserved, nothing. His entire strategy was theft dressed as fairness. The courts saw through it. The family saw through it. Now he's alone with his own nature. Final words. My grandfather sold me his apartment for $1. It was legal. It was documented. It was his choice, made when he was sharp and clear, 2 years before dementia started stealing his mind. My uncle called it fraud, called it theft, called it elder abuse. He took me to court, tried to depose a confused old man, tried to steal what my grandfather had intentionally given away. He failed. The judge saw the documents, heard the notary, read the letter my grandfather wrote anticipating exactly this kind of challenge. The law sided with truth. The apartment is mine. My grandfather died knowing his wish was honored. He squeezed my hand at the end and asked if I had it. I did. He let go peacefully. My uncle got nothing, not from me, not from the estate, not from anyone who saw what he really was. The $1 sale that he called worthless gave me something priceless. Continuation. I live in my grandfather's apartment now. I work in his workshop. I keep his books on his shelves. The nominal price bought me a home full of memory that no court case could put a value on. My uncle wanted to divide it, sell it, turn 50 years of life into cash to split. He didn't understand. Some things aren't measured in dollars. Some things are measured in presence, in relationship, in the difference between someone who visits every week and someone who shows up only when there's money to grab. My grandfather understood that. The law understood that. The apartment is mine. The memory is mine. The love that made it all happen, that's mine too. My uncle can't touch any of it. Not anymore. Not ever.